All right. Good morning, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us. My name is Libby Spencer, and I'm the sales manager at Enartis USA. I know many of you regularly tune into our webinars and are used to seeing Joshua and Lauren, who are the technical winemaking resources for our company. And this webinar will be different than what we're used to for a few reasons. One is the format and the other is the focus. So we'll be focused more on human behavior rather than winemaking practices. One of my favorite things about working for Enartis USA is our robust global network of resources. It's truly a pleasure to work for such a dynamic company with impressively smart, hardworking, and compassionate people. And we thought this would be a great opportunity to showcase some of them. So rather than sharing technical information about a specific winemaking topic, we decided to share some real stories and experiences about how this global pandemic has affected winemakers in different regions. So a couple of notes before we get started. Our guest speakers today come from 6 different time zones. So in order to hold this webinar at a convenient time for you, we had the speakers pre-record their videos. So I hope you'll be patient with me as I manage the technology. And additionally, many of the speakers are not live and so therefore are not able to answer your questions. You'll also see that many of the videos were recorded a week or 2 ago, and so sometimes the dates that are referenced happened in the past. Now, that being said, feel free to ask questions in the chat box, and I'll do my best to answer them, but I'm not the one providing much of the content. Remember that we can all see the chat, so please behave accordingly. And if you find the chat distracting, you can turn it off by clicking there's a gear icon in the corner if you want to remove that. You'll also notice that the audio quality is quite different from one video to the next. There's a bit of a homemade feel. So I expect you'll need to adjust your volume up and down as I transition from one video to the next. So I apologize for that, but we sure appreciate your patience. So to give you a quick summary of the agenda, I've invited a colleague from China and another from Italy to tell us about their current situation, since both of these countries experienced their COVID outbreaks before we did. They're living in our future, and so I wondered what we might learn from them as their countries start to come out of lockdown. And then we'll transition to some colleagues in the Southern Hemisphere who will tell us how winemakers coped with safety issues and physical distancing during harvest. So before we transition to our first video guest, I have my first of 4 survey questions. Question number 1, how are you feeling about harvest? Are you optimistic? Are you neutral? Are you pessimistic? You can click on your choice. I'll give you a moment to do that. One more moment. So a couple of you still clicking. All right, I'm going to end the voting and then share the results. So it looks like for the most part, people are feeling neutral and then an equal number optimistic and concerned. All right. So our first speaker comes from outside of the Enartis network. Her name is Maria João Amorim, and she is a virologist from Portugal. She's a special guest. She currently works with the University of Cambridge. Many of you might know our company president, José Santos, who's also from Portugal, and he is a friend of Maria's. They went to university together, and we asked her to provide her view of our current global situation, as well as any predictions she might have. Also, we asked her, as winemakers, we're very comfortable with yeast and bacteria, but viruses are altogether different. So I asked her to give us a quick education about viruses. So we're going to turn to her video.
Hello, good evening. My name is Maria João Amorim. I'm a virologist. I've been working with viruses for 16 years. I traditionally work with influenza A virus. I've learned how to work with this system in the University of Cambridge, but I'm specialized to work with other viruses too. And since the SARS-CoV-2 has been within these pandemics, I've been following the literature and really investigating methods of diagnosis and as well some way of research in which to help to finish these pandemics. So I'm here today to talk to you about SARS-CoV-2 and about viruses in general. So viruses are really diverse. They are really diverse in their shape. They are really diverse in their genetic material. They are really diverse in their contents. Their genetic material is different, which means that the proteins that they produce are highly different and are highly diverse. You could see here SARS-1, the shape that it has, the origin that it has, and you can see here the spike protein, the protein that is able to attach and to infect our cells. So within viruses are much, much smaller than bacteria. And here I'm showing you a size scale in which you can relate to a tennis ball or to a dot that you write in your computer. And you can see that a bacteria in range size would be here, and the virus would be 1-fold or 10 times smaller and would be here. Viruses infect every kingdom of life. And here I'm showing you an image where you can see a virus infecting a bacteria. And because it infects this bacteria, it's called a bacteriophage. But for coronaviruses, they infect a wide range of mammals and birds, and they also infect humans. And the way that they are able to infect our cells is because they have here this spike protein that recognizes this molecule on our cells called ACE2. And you can see that the virus gets into the cell, is replicated several times in here, and then it assembles many, many copies of the same virion, and it exits the cells. So at the moment, there are 187 countries that contain an active epidemics or that is collectively a pandemic. And the virus is called SARS-CoV-2, but the disease that it's causing, it's COVID-19. So I was asked to talk a bit about whether the virus is going to be maintained in the population or whether it's going to disappear like its cousins, SARS-1 and MERS, which are some coronaviruses. And for this, I have to say that it's very unlikely that the virus is going to disappear because it's widely disseminated in the population, and it's very likely that it will be propagated within time. And because its genetic material is RNA, we can expect that it could have some changes that it would enable the virus to be maintained within the population. And also because traditionally coronaviruses, they are able to cause the common colds, and there are 4 normally circulating viruses. And these viruses, they elicit some sort of immunity, but it wanes off after 6 months to 1 year. And for SARS and for MERS, slightly longer, getting up to 3 years. So most scientists do not believe that the virus is going to disappear. And so when I'm asked whether the virus it's going to become seasonal, I can only say that I don't know. And whether the other interesting question that people ask me is whether during the summertime it's possible that the infection will stop because the virus will be less resistant in the hot periods. And for this, what I like is to compare what we know with other seasonal events. And here I'm showing you the case of influenza infection. And in the case of influenza, it's generally a virus that infects us during winter, and it's very seasonal. You can see here it infecting us from 2010 to 2020, and it always happens in winter season, as you can see here, except within the pandemic event, which you can see here in this shade of light blue, that you can see that it provoked several infections during the year. Also, we have other examples, like, for example, the 1918 flu. The 1918 flu appeared in 3 different waves. And I would like to call your attention that it appeared within March 2018, and it quickly spread throughout the world. And then it reappeared in 2019. And this reappearance was during summer. And you can see here that in 2018, it was circulating during summer times as well. So in the likely event that the virus will be circulating during August, September, October, you should prepare. And the way that we can prepare is by protecting the transmission of the virus and the other people from being infected. And to do this, you should be wearing goggles and masks or respirators, because the virus is transmitted through our mouths, and then you need to breathe it in order to be able to cause an infection. It is also transmitted via contact, which means that if you put your hands in a surface that has got the virus and then you somehow touch your nose and your hands, then you could be infected as well. So you should really wash your hands very thoroughly, because washing your hands will definitely kill the virus if you do it properly and for about 20 seconds, because the virus is an enveloped virus, which means that its outer layer is made out of lipids. And we all know that detergents and soaps are able to destroy the lipids. So I think that getting prepared is the best thing. So wear masks, wear goggles, wear some respirators, and do wash your hands frequently, and wash your eyes too. And I wish you a good luck, and thank you.
All right. I hope that was useful. It seems like we have a long way to go based on that information. As we planned for this webinar, I was fortunate to participate in a preliminary call with Maria. And my favorite thing she said was, if you want to be operational, it makes sense to prepare. And I think that's really great advice that I can apply to many aspects of my life. And I really appreciate her calm clarity. So next we'll move to China. I'd like to introduce my colleague, Yi Shuangge, who manages our business in China. He lives in Changsha, a city of 8 million people in the Hunan province. His city is about 200 miles away from Wuhan province.
Good afternoon, all the Enartis friends. I am Ge Yixuan from Enartis China. Thanks Libby and Jasha's invitation, I took this webinar to exchange some information and some opinions with all the Enartis friends. I just arrived at this place called Inchuan 2 days before by flight, 2 hours flight. This place actually is the place in China where produce the best quality wines, and with a lot of medium small wineries. We usually call this place is like Lapa to United States. This is Inchuan to China. And here is all open, everything is functional, and we arrive here by flight without any problem. And Enartis is already come to here to cooperate with all our winemakers, trying to improve their wine, and also to get the protocols to face some thing happens here this year. For example, this place just faced the probably last 10 years biggest forest. And I would like to share something about COVID-19, what happened to us. I lived in the city where it's more or less 1.5 hours by train to Wuhan. Wuhan is the first place where the outbreak of Chinese COVID-19. And for my city, where we were being locked down for more or less 6 weeks, so 45 days more or less. Wuhan, which is a center, was being locked down for more or less 76 days. And after the lockdown was over for 1 month before, people start to little by little and go outside and to get the normal life back. So now it's already 1 month, more or less, after the lockdown. Lockdowns finish, and nearly everything is normal here. So we go restaurant and we share the experience. We go to the bars and we talk with friends, etc. And also, I would like to have a couple of suggestions for the friends who is still in lockdown. The first is to share some good place and good time with their family. Because a lot of time, people will say that I want to spend time with family, and actually this is an opportunity. The second is I suggest people to read some books which is you wanted to read it 10 years before. And probably last year, we already said the same word, that you said, I want to read this book, but you never start. And now probably it's the time to start, and do not use as much as the cell phone. In the end, I would like to have the best wishes for everyone, every Enartis friends, that we could pass through this pandemic, and we can get our life back soon. I would like to invite everyone really come to China to have a look after this pandemic, and to enjoy the wines here as well. Thank you.
He is so sweet. I don't know about you, but that one really gives me hope. He mentioned in the video that he took a flight to visit that winery, and I really wonder when I will start doing that again. I also thought it was really interesting that after the lockdown, he said it took about 1 month for people to get comfortable going outside to visit restaurants, etc. So even after the official lockdown was lifted, it sounds like there's a self-imposed re-entry period that we should prepare for. And he said to me in another email that, young, healthy people started going out much sooner, but for elderly people, it was another month before they were comfortable leaving home. So now we'll jump to the other side of the world. Our next guest is Michele Manzo. He recorded his video last week, so he references something on May 4th, which obviously was in the past. Michele is an Enartis area manager in northeastern Italy. And we will start his video.
Hi everyone, I'm Michele Manzo, area manager of Enartis Italia. I currently manage the market in the northeast Italy, where Prosecco and Pinot Gris are produced. I live in Lombardy, one of the most affected regions by coronavirus in Italy, and today are 60 days which I'm at home. And we will definitely have to stay home until the 4th of May. This situation has impacted on our daily habits. We cannot meet up our friends, go to visit our parents or grandparents. I can't go to visit my customers, and I'm working at home. We can only go out to buy food at the supermarket, or go to the pharmacy or to the post office. In Italy, only the activities that supply primary goods have remained open, and as the whole world knows, for Italians the wine is a really basic necessity. For this reason, the wineries can continue to bottle and ship wine. What's happening in the Italian wine market now? In Italy, the large-scale distribution market has increased sales of 20%, while sales on the HoReCa channels are completely stopped due to the lockdown of pubs, restaurants and hotels. E-commerce has recorded a 300% increase in sales, but you must keep in mind that in Italy it always represented a marginal market. As many of you know, the two main wine fairs, ProWine and Vinitaly, have been postponed to the next year. For this reason, the wineries are organizing wine tasting with buyers or customers online, sending them samples of their wines and tasting them via Skype or Zoom. Advertising on social networks has increased a lot, where producers begin to create video content on Instagram or Facebook. In Italy, before this virus, they were underutilized for the promotion of wines. Today, the Italian wineries are experiencing different situations. Those of small dimensions and which have to cultivate the vineyards suffer from the lack of foreign laborers, mainly from the Eastern Europe. We hope in a good weather season, because it's very important in this moment to follow in a very well way all the phytosanitary treatments. Otherwise, it will be very, very difficult to manage the quality of the grapes. What's happening in the cellar? Inside the cellar, the main concern is to avoid premature aging of the wines in the tanks. Especially those who produce sparkling wines are concerned about the possible start of malolactic fermentation. The big bottlers are buying 20% more bulk wine to meet the needs of the large-scale distribution and have very fast bottling rates. Therefore, they make very quick clarification, and so they haven't enough time to the co-stabilization of the wines. The harvest is very uncertain. However, we expect a lack of manpower, especially for the maintenance of the workers' safety distances. The cellar will not have the usual number of workers available. Some DOC are reducing the yields of grape per hectare to avoid an excessive stock of wine. And also the Italian government is evaluating to applicate an emergency distillation about 3 million of hectoliters of wine for the production of alcohol, useful for the production of disinfectant, but also is an opportunity to avoid a fall of the prices of wines. As you may have guessed, the situation is not easy, but we are all helping each other to be able to get out of it as soon as possible. In these days, there is a decrease in the number of cases, so we can say that stay at home works. I thank my colleague from Enartis USA and all of you that are following this webinar. I send you a big virtual hug from Italy. Ciao, and stay safe and stay at home.
Excuse me, I really appreciated his point about premature aging. I know this is an issue for a number of winemakers as certain sales channels have slowed dramatically. We do have some creative solutions. If anyone wants to learn more, we can schedule a call to discuss your options. He also mentioned that large bulk producers are buying 20% more wine than average to keep up with demand. We have certainly seen that trend in the US as well. I also thought it was interesting that potentially 3 million hectoliters of wine will be distilled into alcohol for disinfectants. That's a lot of wine. So before the next video, we have our second survey question, which is about the timing of harvest orders. This year, as you prepare for harvest, do you plan to place your orders earlier than normal, or will you place them at the same time? Or are you going to wait and see how things shake out? All right, one more moment to cast your ballot. All right, I'll share the results. So it looks like most of you are either preparing earlier or at the same time. So good to know. Just so you know, we have placed our major harvest order with our parent company in Italy, and I really went big. So I wanted to make sure that we have everything on hand to help you through this harvest. We figure you have enough challenges without having to worry about whether or not your yeast arrives on time. So we'll be prepared to help you regardless of your timeline. So now we will pivot. Some of you know that Enartis USA has added a soil scientist and viticulturist to our team a couple of years ago. His name is JT Yeager, and he's focused on selling a vineyard product that enhances soil biodiversity. You know that Enartis is an enological product company, so this is a diversion from our core offerings, but we're really, really excited about this product. The first application of this product occurs at bud break. So because of the nature of his work, JT has been visiting vineyards regularly during shelter in place. He even has a fancy badge declaring his work is essential. I asked JT to report what he's seeing in the vineyard and to discuss potential issues for the upcoming growing season.
Hello everyone, my name is JT Yeager and I am the soil scientist and viticulturist here at Enartis USA, based out of the North Coast, out of Windsor, California. And sort of being on the vineyard side of things, we felt it would be valuable for both winemakers and grape growers to sort of hear about how we're handling the pandemic in the North Coast of California with agriculture as an essential business. So I put my ear to the ground and asked my grape growing colleagues and friends in the industry, a few questions related to sort of day-to-day stuff. So the first question I asked was about labor and sort of what we can expect in the vineyard in terms of overall vineyard personnel. And generally I hesitate to talk about vineyard labor simply because, pandemic aside, shortage is part of a trend in agriculture due to a number of reasons, both political and logistical. I'm not going to get into any of those, but if you can remember 2007 and 2007 through 2009, the last economic recession, many wineries and growers had to put a similar hold on hiring, like we're seeing now. And so the problem with this is that various tasks in the vineyard are really time sensitive. We must carry out certain things at certain growth stages in the grapevine life cycle. And so, things such as canopy management, all your vineyard sprays, irrigation, fertigations, like the whole list, there's very critical timing of all these things. And so if you don't have the seasonal hires or the viticulture interns that sort of help carry that burden of certain tasks, really then you're going to be limited in the number of tasks that you can actually do at certain times during the season. And also to add to it, many companies have cut hours of the year-round personnel. And so this sort of even further restricts their ability to do certain things. Basically, less people working reduced hours is really going to stretch our vineyard people thin. And basically through all this, I know that essential tasks will be finished. The essential tasks will get done, and quality grapes will still be produced in the 2020 vintage. But it's going to be a challenging year, and just kind of the truth of it, less urgent and less critical vineyard tasks may not get done. So I asked another question as well pertaining to sort of, just basically how do you expect COVID-19 to impact the sort of day-to-day of vineyard management? And it's kind of interesting that basically across the board, consistent answer. It's not too surprising. Most growers, I think, are concerned with maintaining employee health and safety through all this. And really, this should be a grower's top priority anyway. But in the sort of the era of COVID-19, this has really become a challenge. Basically increasing all the same things you want to do in the winery. So increasing hand washing, wearing face masks when possible, disinfecting common contact points at regular intervals, like your porta potties, your places where people clock in and out. Basically all the same things that you'd have to do in the winery need to be done out in the vineyard too as well. At least here in California, we had an early start to the year, especially in the North Coast, just generally due to a lack of rain and unseasonably warm temperatures in, late winter and early spring. And so, really when the shelter in place kicked in was when the season really started. We had bud break. And so grape growers really had the challenge of doing the day-to-day tasks involved in management while keeping, the new SOPs set in place, basically keeping to those from the very, very onset of the season. So what are some of the ways that growers have changed their day-to-day management? Travel around the vineyard, travel to the vineyard. A lot of grape growers have actually said only one person per vehicle. when going to the vineyard or when on the vineyard itself. It provides some set of difficulties, but if you have an estate vineyard, I've even heard some estate vineyards utilizing bicycles for some of their employees to get around. You don't have enough trucks or ATVs, so you do it the analog way. I mean, when we start to get consistently warm temperatures, above 90 degrees, I think biking around the vineyard is going to be a lot less appealing. But for now, it seems to work for some growers. Also vineyard managers are just trying to space their crew out once they get to that vineyard block, not allowing them to work in the same rows, distance them basically whenever possible. Taking all the precautions at your own vineyard, basically throughout the year. If there's a single infected person that comes onto the property, you won't have a larger outbreak. It'll be just that, a single person infected that'll have to quarantine. So one last thought to sort of lead everything. So growing regions, again, like I said, we had early bud break. And the season continues to move quickly. We've had really warm temperatures for springtime. And so if this keeps up, we're going to have an early harvest. It's just kind of the way of things. And so this means that grapes will be coming into the winery much earlier than anticipated, and winemakers will have less time to prepare for a very, very unique harvest, a very, very unique time in which to make wine. So really start preparing now, getting the necessary PPE if you can, and think about what harvest is going to look like. All the added precautions and new SOPs, you want to be able to take in as many grapes as you can to make as much of that wine that you can, and so just be prepared. Anyway, that's all the time I have. I'll pass it back to Libby, and thanks for having me.
Thank you, JT. Preparation certainly is a key theme. I hope all of us are able to get the PPE we need to be safely operational. So just a note, JT is on the call right now, so if you have questions for him at the end, he is available to you. We're going to move to survey question number 3, which is, what do you expect about production volumes this harvest? Do you expect to be making more wine, less wine, or the same amount of wine? I'll give you one more moment. I see a few more ballots ticking in. All right, I'm closing the voting. It looks like most of you, or quite a few of you, will be making the same amount of wine, and some will be making less. I hope all of your businesses are doing okay. We really are pulling for all of our customers out there. We're going to transition now to the Southern Hemisphere and talk about harvest operations. We have 3 guests, one from South Africa, one from Australia, and another from New Zealand. First up is Lida Malandra, who is our business manager for Enartis South Africa. A couple things I want to point out in Lida's video to make sure that you catch it. She mentions that because harvest was in full swing by the time the pandemic reached South Africa, a lot of people, winemakers and winery workers, were really not paying attention to the news. I think we can all relate to that with harvest brain. So she's going to discuss some specific day-to-day challenges of COVID winemaking. And also she mentioned something about, because so many South African wineries, large ones, are in rural settings, people live on site. So that created some interesting operations.
Hi, I'm Lida Malandra, the General Manager for Enartis South Africa. I was asked to share some practical aspects to managing COVID-19 pandemic during harvest. I'm just going to share some information on our experiences and some feedback from our winemakers, and I hope this could be useful to all of you. So locally, our harvest started 2 weeks early in South Africa, which in hindsight was a blessing in disguise. The pandemic hit our shores probably towards the tail end of harvest. So literally the last 10 to 15% of the harvest that was left. And it was quite region specific, and mainly the larger producers were impacted by this. So when COVID-19 became a reality, the first thing sellers did was educate their staff. Many of the large wineries are quite rural, and because they were in harvest, the news was really not top of mind, and it meant that there was aggressive education and information sharing that needed to happen from a management point of view. And a lot of the sellers would reinforce the hygiene measures needed with daily meetings. Daily meetings were also accompanied by sharing the statistics of deaths versus infections locally and globally, which gave a lot of weight to the relevance of why this was happening, and measures had to be put in place. I know one seller made a video that was put onto a continuous loop on one of their monitors, reinforcing the hygiene measures needed and all the essential information. Many temporary staff opted to stop working, and many sellers actually let the temporary staff go. And this was for various reasons. But firstly, it was to control the number of people from outside entering into the cellar. And many of the temporary staff were not based on the premises, but were coming from outside in. And the permanent staff at these bigger sellers are provided with housing on the premises. This gave sellers the options to create teams of workers, and each team was then housed together. This was part of their contingency plan. So if one team became ill, there was another team that could continue with the harvest. And the sellers would also help with weekly grocery purchase. So either one member of each team would be nominated to go to town with everybody's grocery list, or everyone gave their grocery list to the management, and those groceries were bought and brought back for the team members. And this was really to keep people safe and limit the social interactions. Another option was for them to provide all the meals for staff, which meant that they didn't have to really go to town or have that kind of interaction. So definitely having housing for your staff on the premises is a big advantage going into harvest. All the staff were kitted with face masks, which had to be worn at all times. And staff were not allowed to congregate in communal areas or be in groups at the smoking areas. Social distancing was heavily enforced. Many of the sellers limited the number of entrances that could be utilized in the cellar. At each entrance, they had a station with hand sanitizer. Each person that entered or exited the cellar had to sanitize their hands. Of course, this was also hand sanitizers besides soap was provided in all the bathrooms, and a clear how-to guide of correct hand washing was also made quite public. Outside of the sellers actually closed their gates. This meant for us as suppliers, there were processes that were put in place for deliveries. So once we received an order, we would then confirm a date and a time slot for when the delivery would take place. As we have our own logistics team and we deliver probably 90% of our products, this was quite an important part of the COVID and harvest. So when our drivers arrived at the cellar, there would either be someone manning the gate and they were let in, or we had to phone and tell them we were at the gate. Our vans were then directed to a specific meeting point. At that point, they would open their windows and our drivers' temperatures would be measured with a temporal thermometer, obviously via the open window. If they passed this and their temperatures were fine, they could exit the vehicle. They then had to sanitize their hands all the time, having masks and even gloves. And once this was done, they could offload their orders. Some of the sellers actually asked us to go paperless. And what this meant was that where our normal orders are accompanied with invoices and certification or documentation, what would happen was the winemaker would visually agree to the delivery. On the return of our drivers to the office, we would follow up the delivery with an email. This would include the invoice and any other certification or necessary documentation that was then sent electronically. So the other big factor was winemakers said you should absolutely ensure that you have sufficient stock. You want to limit the amount of people entering and exiting your premises and lower their potential for cross-contamination. I think when it was just in the lockdown was just announced, we had winemakers stockpiling, but obviously that's not really necessary now. We are able to deliver. It's really a strange thing for South Africa because we're the only country in the world where you are not allowed to sell wine or any other liquor. You are not allowed to buy liquor. So as a consumer, I'm not allowed to go to the supermarket and buy any booze. And wineries are not allowed to export. So literally, wineries in South Africa have no cash flow. They're able to maintain and manage the vineyards and the cellars, and they can complete the harvest and they can look over their wine, but you cannot export, you cannot sell, you cannot bottle, you cannot label. We are in week 5 now, so you can imagine there are some people that are rather desperate to buy alcohol that they cannot get their hands on. But we're hoping that our president will change this and just lighten the restrictions for the wineries going forward. So that's it in a nutshell. We wish you all the best for your harvest, and I hope this has been useful.
Can you imagine? No alcohol during quarantine. It sounds like a nightmare. And also the part about wineries literally having no cash flow just is heartbreaking. I hope you guys are strong. I think Lita is on the call, so if you have questions for Lita, I'm sure she'd love to hear them. Okay, I'm running out of extra time, so I'm going to keep moving things along. The next person is Tilly Bowden, who is the business manager at Enartis Pacific. She's located in Melbourne, Australia.
Thanks for reaching out, Libby. I think at this strange time around the globe, when so much is uncertain, it's really positive to share experiences, understand how people are approaching this new way of working, and help each other navigate making wine with the current restrictions and limitations in place. My name is Tilly Bowden and I'm the Managing Director for Enartis Pacific, based in Melbourne, Australia. Like so many people around the globe, since the week of March 16th, our team here in Australia has been working from home. It is a response to the government's implementation, as well as community concerns, to minimise the spread and attempt to flatten the curve. Expressions we've become all too familiar with these past few months, since COVID-19 became a widespread reality in our daily lives. There are both national and state restrictions here in Australia, so the experiences of our customers and team can be slightly different depending on where they're located. But the stage 3 restrictions that were put in place came with the message, if you can stay home, you must stay home. As part of food production and within the essential service group, wineries across Australia have remained open and operational, at least from the production point of view. Winery restaurants, cellar doors and tourism experiences are closed, and sales, marketing and administration functions, where possible, have been relocated to a work from home scenario. At the time the restrictions came into place, Australia was 80% of its way through the 2020 harvest. There were, of course, some cool climate regions like Tasmania and Coonawarra that had to manage more like 80 to 90% of the harvest in this new way. but for most it was a quickly evolving dynamic reaction during the busy fruit intake period. Even in the weeks leading up to the restrictions, as the impact of the pandemic was seen devastating other countries across the globe, we started to shift how wineries were working. Teams were split to minimise interaction and to try to ensure business continuity should the virus enter the winery. This was implemented across all areas, including winemaking, cellar operations, vineyard and bottling. While in the case of smaller wineries with only one person in the role, they were avoiding with contact with outsiders altogether to try to stay healthy. Customers attempted to harvest what they could quickly and move contract-made wine back to their own facilities before restrictions were enforced. It was an unknown dynamic and nobody was certain when they talked about potential lockdown who would be impacted, how it would work, and how long it would be in place. So there was a very busy lobby to the government going on in the background to ensure wineries were classified as essential and allowed to continue as harvest was racing along. Sanitizer, alcohol sprays and cleaning wipes were made available through sites, with workspaces continually cleaned and strict social distancing enforced. Indoor working spaces were quickly reconfigured to comply. Thermometers in sites were made available to workers, but for many it was not mandatory to enter workplaces. Cleaning crews would come in between shift changes to ensure everything was effectively sanitised and also help maintain the gap of time between teams so there was absolutely no crossover. All workers non-essential to the production process were no longer required on site. Transporters delivering fruit or supplies were asked to stay in their truck and not permitted to use facilities. And everything was moved to more of an honour system where PODs were no longer signed and things were sent electronically rather than paper copies. Communal areas like lunchrooms were closed or restricted to minimise any groups, and clear, constant guidelines were circulated on company policies, directives were shared between different sites and how they were approaching it, and everyone learned quickly together how to be safe, compliant and productive in this new dynamic. It is still uncertain at this time for how long we will have to observe the shutdown of so many services and businesses, but hopefully that May 11 review that we have here will be a positive one. Considering our population of 25 million people, as of the 23rd of April, we have 6,656 cases and 75 deaths. So no doubt the concept of social distancing will be one with us for a while yet, and it will be a long time before anyone is sharing tasting glasses again. But we do see wineries across Australia adapting and still making great wines, so there's no doubt in the US, with some time and understanding to prepare, that 2020 can't be a great vintage for you as well. Wishing you all.
Thank you, Tilly. I think it's interesting to hear both Lita and Tilly mention that the quarantine or physical distancing guidelines occurred in the last couple of weeks of harvest, which of course is very different than the potential situation we might face of having to plan for harvest from the very beginning with social distancing guidelines in place. So it's something different to think about. We have one final video, which is Shirley Hendry in New Zealand. As many of you know, New Zealand had some of the most restrictive lockdown procedures in the world. So it's great to hear from Shirley. And just another note, Shirley's video, I think, is the quietest audio quality. So crank up the volume and lean in.
Even after 11 years of making wine, I still think the cool thing about making wine is that every vintage is unique. Harvest 2020 will be no exception. Kia ora, hi, my name is Shirley and I work for Enartis and I'm based in New Zealand. I would like to share with you my personal experience on what it's been like to work through the COVID-19 pandemic and a harvest at the same time. New Zealand we're still currently in harvest and will probably we'd be through by mid-May. We were also in week 3 of what has now become a 4.5-week nationwide lockdown, with only 7 essential businesses operating. Essentially, the country was given 48 hours notice to lockdown. At this stage, only 25% of our harvest was through. We also, as an industry at this stage, were not immediately recognized as an essential business. First, then panic. As you can imagine, was extremely stressful, confusing, and uncertainty surely kicked in. Not only for the industry, but for every single person working, living, and visiting New Zealand at the time. There were key points we had to follow as a nation and as an industry. Our top priority was to eliminate the increase in the imminent widespread breakout of the virus. Health and safety for every New Zealander and visitor in New Zealand at the time was and still is our top priority. As an industry, our immediate action was to register with the government with permission to operate as an essential business during the lockdown. In the meantime, pending this decision, we had to implement plans in the event the wine industry remained classified as non-essential. Production, what we've done so far, what we do with our fruit, what we do with our crew, what we do with our bottling schedules, our export orders, our stock on hand, etc. Fortunately, and we are very privileged, that the government authorised the inclusion of the wine industry as an essential service. Perhaps making the top 6 exports helped. Either way, we were very appreciative that we could actually continue with the harvest. The next important step, once we received the guidelines to operate during the lockdown, labour, extra protocols to operate within the guidelines of COVID-19, liaising with clients, cross-referencing our current winemaking practices for any changes due to COVID-19 regulations, established additional health and operational health and safety protocols to comply within the strict COVID-19 guidelines, which fortunately for most COVID-19 guidelines of the already strict BRC regulations most wineries already have certification for. The vineyard, we saw new steps for fruit sampling, respecting social distancing, 2-meter distances, but most of it was done by actually driving through the vineyard rather than walking. Packing, most of our harvest is done by machine, so this was relatively easy to manage within the COVID-19 restrictions. Protocols for people movement, this was new, in and out of the winery. It was strictly enforced, both for staff and authorised essential visitors only. Record keeping was ramped up to include even more cleaning schedules, staff movements during and even after their shifts, accommodation. Another important issue, which was different for us, most of our staff who normally cohabitate during this time had to self-isolate outside the winery, so we controlled their movements after their shifts. Some winemakers even moving into camper vans on site, some housed in hotels during the harvest. Again, health and safety for all our staff is our top priority. Dry goods, fortunately for us, which is normally in any circumstances, we had our dry goods delivered 2 weeks before the onset of the harvest, and so we are very appreciated as there's less trucks on the road during the lockdown. All in all, this has been very unsettling, with so many unknowns to begin and end with. But the 2 things that keep us going: the unbelievable attitude of every single person working in and around the industry, the attitude towards each other, and the commitment of everyone working towards the fight of COVID-19. The fruit. We experienced some harsh drought conditions, even some frost, but the bulk of our fruit really played ball. We have amazing quality, a great normal acid balance. It looks like 2020 is surely going to be one to remember. Good luck to you all. Be kind to each other. keep drinking New Zealand wine. From all of us here in New Zealand, kia kaha, which means keep safe. Good luck.
Thank you, Shirley. I think Shirley is also on the call if anyone wants to speak to her. So it sounded like, again, this all happened when 25% of the fruit was in. So I can't imagine having to pivot that hard in the middle of harvest. I also like the suggestion of people just move into the winery, just get a camper van and live on site. It also seems like one thing to really consider is the amount of cleaning labor that will be required in the winery. That a lot more people will need to be employed to keep common spaces clean. Okay, we have one more survey question, which is, what do you think will be your biggest challenge for the 2020 harvest? Are you most concerned with physical distancing, cost cutting, labor shortages, or maybe just unforeseen issues we haven't thought about yet? I'll give you one more moment to fill out the survey if you're able. All right, I'll end the voting. It looks like across the board, all the concerns, we have all the concerns, which sounds about right. Okay, so I just want to wrap it up now. I'm at 9:59. So thank you so much for your time and attention. I'd like to send a big thank you to our guest speakers. Thank you so much for helping us, and thanks for sharing your stories and unique experiences. I really appreciate the support. Thank you, thank you. And another big thank you to all of you who tuned in and joined us as webinar guests. On behalf of Enartis USA, we are so grateful to be deemed an essential business and therefore operational. And we are incredibly grateful to our customers, and we wish you the very, very best as we approach this difficult harvest season. Thank you again. Please stay safe, and we'll see you next time. Thank you so much.